right, happy Tuesday, everybody. It's July 14th. We're almost in the middle of July. Unbelievable. And today I am going to be giving an update on the Asian tea industry. So I say Asia because this is some news information that's going, or not going, but has been affecting India, China, as well as several other growing regions as well, because rain has taken over the past, I would say, the past month or so. I've been hearing about flooding. First, I was hearing about it in Assam, which is a very large tea growing area, and just learning that the flooding was negatively impacting logistics as well as production, as well as like just infrastructure in the cities, especially during a time when these urban areas, so think of Dibrugarh, Guwahati, the two main urban areas of the tea growing region of Assam. Uh, Lebanon, cool. Nice to meet you. My name is Elise. I'm really grateful that we've gotten to meet. We have somebody from Lebanon watching on Instagram. I hope you like tea, because that's all we talk about here is tea. But now, so that was like last month when we were hearing about all of the flooding going on in Assam, and I'm part of a couple of different like citizens groups of Dibrugarh, just because I like to keep up with what's going on in the city outside of even tea production, like what's going on politically, and of course, weather-wise as well, and had seen in some of these Facebook groups how devastating these heavy floods have been, for the tea industry. But now it's a problem in China, and so for the past few weeks there has been heavy flooding throughout China, several different states, and actually some pretty big devastations to infrastructure there as well, as far as dams. Several different dams because of these flooding up rivers. And then also, the pandemic has negatively impacted that because, hi, Eric Glass, thanks for saying hi. It doesn't negatively impact, the ability of the state to manage the infrastructure to handle this increased flooding because, things are on lockdown, people are working from home. It's just a completely different situation now than it usually is. So Eric is asking, last year was pretty bad. Yes. I mean, this is monsoon season, right? So the summer season in Asia is known as monsoon season. It's a heavy rain time. And every summer you can kind of expect these heavy rains to come through. But this year in particular, I am reading it is much higher. It's like 40% higher than what it was last year or what it usually is. And so, yeah, Eric, we were talking about this a couple days ago. You had said that Cindy Chen was sending you photos, and actually she sent me some photos too, because I'm trying to get some tea. And she's like, yeah, right now you just got to wait a couple of days because we're dealing with some major flooding. And she sent me some photos of in Wuishan of how flooded it is. But there is some major news, and a friend was telling me about this outside of tea, someone that keeps up with, international politics and what's going on around the world. And he was under the impression that the government was purposefully opening these dams, which now I've read some articles, they are purposely opening some of these dams, but not to, do any harm to the infrastructure itself. They're doing it to release a lot of the pressure that has been building up in these rivers that have for several weeks been, overpressuring and overflowing due to the increased rainfall in the area. So now, I'm talking about how these heavy rains affect like the infrastructure, affect the lifestyle. When you're dealing with heavy flooding, you can't just easily, get in your car and just like hop to your office and get business done as usual. Kind of, yeah, you have to be patient and hold off. Just like Cindy telling me, "Oh yeah, hold on, I can't send you teas right now because we're dealing with these mass floodings." Um, but it does affect the tea as well, and that's the education part that I want to go into today to talk about. My desk area is getting a little overwhelmed, flooded with too many tea wares and tea things. Yeah, so there has been quite a bit of research, and I found a really great paper that I'm just going to kind of go over some of the talking points of this peer-reviewed. This is an academic paper looking at the effect of heavy rains, i.e. monsoon season. So this paper is not even looking at like irregularly heavier rains. It's just looking at the normal shifts of rainfall throughout the year. The main one being the monsoon season, which we're currently a part of right now. There should be heavier rains versus the springtime, after the winter into the spring. Not to say that it won't rain at all, but rain is much less. It's, less consistent. And it plays a big part in why your spring teas are so different than your summer teas. And then also the autumn teas as well. So before I get into talking about this article, which was written by Dr. Selena Ahmed, who is like the foremost researcher on tea quality and climate change, she has some good results here, so it'll be kind of fun to look that over. And I will be drinking tea. I am going to drink, I don't know what this is, handmade tea. It just says handmade tea, November harvest, so this is an autumn harvest. So, probably, drier, but having freshly experienced the monsoon season. This is just like a hand-rolled black tea. It looks really beautiful. I'll show you. So Eric says that he's also heard that one reason they are opening the dams is that they are not built holding such pressure. Yes, they aren't. Or maybe they could have been adapted to handle the pressure of the increased, flooding right now. But, due to pandemic, it's been a challenge for them to keep up with all the infrastructure. So here's my handmade black tea that I'll be brewing right now. Very nice. Beautiful. Looking forward to this. So yeah, before I get into this peer-reviewed paper, I am first going to look at just some stats. So this is an article from Krishi Jagran, some publication in India. I've never actually read anything. Usually, there's a couple of different publications I usually get my Indian news from, so this is interesting. It's the first time I've interacted with this, and it's in the agriculture section of their publication. Excess rains may cause long-term damage to the tea industry. So long-term damage is not necessarily from the rain itself. These areas are used to handling floods that come in through and damage that comes through. So it's not the damage itself, it's not the physical damage, what they're implying here, that is going to have long-term damage on the industry. It's more economic damage because the industry is just fresh dealing with the first flush having been stolen from them essentially by the pandemic, the lockdown. They weren't able to hire their laborers to go and it was illegal for them to be managing their factories and processing tea. Now it's a different story. They are able to get back to work at 100% capacity of where they were before. So they should be banging, right? And this is the second flush. This is monsoon flush. There's definitely tea being produced right now. But because of this flooding, there was another break dealing with that. And then once I get into the article with Dr. Ahmed's article, about rainfall, heavy rainfall, and tea quality, you will see that, even if they are able to rebound a flush, a harvest after these, floods have passed, then the quality of that product may be lower than usual. Good to see you, Amanda. So, So the rains have actually been good for certain farmers. So there's certain crops that actually thrive in heavy rains. So that's rice. That's the main one. Paddy. They want, the rice likes living in these moist environments. And tea does like rain. Tea needs rain. So growing conditions for tea, the tea plant, it varies variety to variety. Varieties like different, cold hardiness. But it doesn't like to sit in rain. It doesn't like to be flooded in rain. It doesn't like to, drown itself in rain. And so that's why you see tea optimally grown in certain areas. The condition of the soil is a big part of what a tea farmer is going to be, looking for planting, where they're going to plant. So the first thing is pH. And the pH of the soil doesn't really have too much to do with rainfall. But that is like the prerequisite condition, is that the Camellia sinensis plant enjoys growing in pH conditions from 4.5 to 5.5, which is actually quite acidic. And so that's why you see tea growing in more of like the volcanic areas of the world. Those places like Hawaii. Hawaii is a good place of that. And really pretty much we could look at the map of the Ring of Fire, like where it's known to have, more volcanic activity, and see that, tea is growing more successfully there because of the sulfuric acid in the soil. And so that's like that. When they say volcanic soil, that's what they're looking for. Volcanoes are just filled with pressure of sulfuric acid. And the tea actually likes that. Not too much of it. There could be sulfur burns. I've heard actually in Hawaii, I've heard different opinions about this. So in Hawaii, there's an active volcano there right now. There is an active volcano. And that active volcano releases what's called fog. It's basically volcano fog. And that volcano fog is like very high density of sulfuric acid. And so a lot of people complain about the fog. It's like irritating on the eyes, irritating on sinuses, for good reason. And, could be stinky too, right? Sulfuric acid's pretty stinky. But I've heard different opinions from the tea farmers on Big Island that sometimes the tea plants actually like that fog, like they're just kind of singing in that fog, taking in that acidic environment. While others say that too much of that fog can actually burn the tea plants and cause damage. But when it's in the soil and it's, acidified that soil to that sweet pH of 4.5 to 5.5, then the tea will grow really well. Okay, so now in regards to rain and soil, that has to do with good drainage. So the tea plants would love if it rained every single day. That's just like ideal. If it just like rained lightly every single day, got a little wet, and then the water would immediately go away after it rained, the tea plant would be very happy. And so that's why, you do see some irrigation systems in some tea growing regions because maybe they don't have regular rainfall. A place like Hawaii, they pretty much get a blessing of rain every day. Maybe not heavy rain. They do get heavy rains, but it's very common for just very light rains to pass through on a daily. You don't like bog? It's a real thing, look it up, Google it, bog. It's a real thing. I didn't make that up, Eric. So sandy soils, that's, going to allow drainage, now like heavy clay soils that don't have, pieces in it that allow the water to go through. It just compacts the water in and holds the water in. Areas where the land accumulates the water is not really good. And so that's actually why tea grows really well on slopes, because, even if it's terraced, the water is going to go down. And not stay in one place. And so, some tea farmers I've seen, if they don't have the ideal, sandy soil conditions, they can actually set up their farm to allow for that aeration and that flow to happen through the soil just by sloping the land. It doesn't have to be like a very steep slope and terracing like you usually see with tea. It could just be like a really subtle slope that just slowly goes down. And that subtlety is enough for that water flow to go to one place. And so where all the water goes is definitely not where you would put your tea plants, because if you put it there, your tea plant root system will rot. The tea plant does not like to be left in the rain. And so with these heavy rains happening in Assam, there inevitably will be damage to tea plants, especially in these big gardens. Flooding's happening, and the flooding will, be concentrated in certain spots depending on the topography of the area. Assam is not a very mountainous, terraced tea growing region. It's a large and expansive area, and so flooding's happening. It's possible that it could be damaging all of the tea plants, but I'd imagine that in heavy flooding like this, there would be, spotty damage, where just tea plants will just rot. From the root system, it'll just rot, and then the rest of the tree will die. So yeah, tea loves rain, but then doesn't love rain. It's a funny love-hate relationship, and so a tea farmer has to be really mindful of these things as they set up their garden. So according to the data from the Indian Meteorological Department, said that the region has received was more than 40% compared to the previous year. And the monsoon is maintaining its intensity, so they're not seeing it ease up at all. It wasn't, as far as this article is making it seem, it wasn't just like a one-off, rainstorm. It actually is a part of this whole monsoon season, and they don't see it letting up. Is this an effect of climate change? I don't know. Maybe, if you want to attach some meaning to it, you can do that. But what's happening is happening already. And so that's the whole point why I'm sharing with you is why is it important? If you do see these articles about flooding in these tea growing regions, why is it important for our tea, and how might we see some effect either on the economics, so that's pricing of tea, which, in past live streams I have been talking about kind of the crazy pricing of tea, mostly price going up. And this is not just the specialty price, like what we deal in. This is also the commodity price. The commodity price of tea is going up, and that's an effect of scarcity. And so, heavy flooding like this that affects the yields will affect scarcity and will affect the price. So that is something that we may end up seeing. I'm not saying for sure it's going to happen that way, but that is some effect of these types of events, as well as understanding how the quality of the tea might be different. So you might get some second flush Assam tea, after some months and realize, this tastes a little bit different than what I'm used to. And the heavy rainfall could be a factor on it. Again, I'm not guaranteeing that that's what's going to happen, but these are all things to keep in mind. So yeah, 40% more rain than what they're used to. So Eric, you were asking, and this doesn't say about China. This article is specifically about Assam, about India. But these places are all very close to each other, and storms do kind of go on different paths and have different styles and rates and effects. But I would think that China is also getting increased rainfall. So I did look up some articles about Chinese flooding, and that is definitely getting a lot more mainstream publicity right now, especially because of these infrastructure issues, these dams opening up. So the government is purposely opening the dams to release the pressure, but when they open those dams, there's people below, and so they're flooding out whole villages. And so that's a bit more controversial. It's a bit more political, and so I think that's why we are seeing a lot more of that in the mainstream media. So this is an article from the New York Times. You know, as mainstream as you can get. And the title of the article is "Severe Floods in China Leave Over 106 Dead or Missing." So, you know, these floods are definitely affecting people. You know, it's not just inconveniencing industries or inconveniencing infrastructures, which it definitely is, but it's actually affecting people's lives. And so, yeah, this article just kind of lists off all the different states. I mean, pretty much it's mostly South China, but all of the rivers in South China are just completely getting flooded and overrun with water. And Hubei is one of the hardest hit from these floods, was also the hardest hit from the pandemic. So just what a nightmare to have to deal with. You know, just so much craziness going on. And so, you know, I think that's enough talking about what's been happening. You know, and I did want to make sure that I talked about these dams, because I had a friend talking to me that's completely not into Chinese culture, Chinese history, or anything like that, but he knew about this. He's very much interested in Chinese politics, and you know, there's a lot of skepticism around the Chinese government right now, you know, very much thanks to our leadership here in the United States, unfortunately, building up a lot of unnecessary bias and prejudice against Chinese culture. So there's a lot of pessimism and doubt that, you know, the Chinese government does have the best for their people in mind. And that's not what I'm talking about here. But that right there, like, is increasing people's visibility of what's going on in China. I mean, that same friend also knew about the conflicts going on at the border of China and India. And that's like a much more obscure conflict going on. That's a very obscure thing. It's not like a huge raging battle, raging war going on. But there is a lot of contention. There is a lot of politics going on there. My friend actually knew about that. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know, China's in the spotlight right now. Maybe not in the best spotlight, but it's in the spotlight. So I just wanted to clear that up, and I'll definitely be clearing that up with my friend about the dams. Because I was like, I just don't see the Chinese, like, what would they have out of it? I mean, building a dam, that's another thing. So that's what's happening in India. They're trying to build a dam in India to collect, the benefit from that, and then completely drying up millions of people's water sources. So if anything, yeah, I have heard of, building stuff, but not purposefully destroying things. So it was good to clear that up in this article, that there is a purpose of why they're opening those dams, and that is to release the pressure from these heavy rains. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the education portion, which is reviewing Dr. Selena Ahmed's article. The one that I found, I'm sure she's published many articles. She's been actually working on this area of study for a long time. I believe since I've even started working in tea and studying tea, I've been hearing about her. Actually, this paper was published in 2014. So yeah, it is, a long-standing area of research that, okay, and so this article is called Effects of Extreme Climate Events on Tea, Functional Quality, Validate Indigenous Farmer Knowledge and Sensory Preferences in Tropical China. What a great article. Here, I'll put the link here. And if you guys feel so inclined, you are welcome to go check out this article. This is a peer-reviewed article. So, just if you don't know what that means, peer-reviewed, if you've heard that before, peer-reviewed is like, it's not just like a journalist that's able to like write something and then publish it and put it out. And then even that, like, traditional journalists that are working for like the New York Times or a major media outlet like that, there is going to be a high level of due diligence of making sure, fact checking, making sure that inaccurate information is not being shared to the public. But peer reviewed is like levels higher. And so these articles are not published in like mainstream media. These articles are usually published in scientific journals. And in order to get published, it's a very long process of your research and of your writing being approved by several layers of academic experts, academic professionals. So that's peer reviewed, and so your peers will review your research, make sure that your research makes sense, that you follow proper scientific method. So if someone says that they're referencing a peer reviewed article, like, that's good. Referencing a peer-reviewed article is definitely higher quality than referencing New York Times, even though we do reference the New York Times often. So yes, so there's a lot in this article about climate change and how it's happening and what is doing to the tea. So it says here, let's see, this is part of the abstract. I'll go down to like the actual findings. Sampling was conducted in a major tea producing area of China during an extreme drought through the onset of the East Asian monsoon so that's first flush and second flush, in order to capture effects of extreme climate events that are likely to become more frequent with climate change. So their study here was not on an extreme case. Like what we're talking about today, this year, happening right now in Asia is actually extreme rainfall. Extreme climate change is happening right now. And so the findings in this paper is actually from like a normal year, the more normal contrast between the first flush and the second flush. So I was saying earlier, the first flush is happening during a time of not like real drought, but like seasonal lack of rainfall. There's going to be less rainfall during the spring. You're just coming out of the winter. And that's good. You want that. And then in the summertime, this monsoon comes through and increases the rain. So it says, compared to the spring drought, tea growth during the monsoon period was up to 50% higher. Higher of what? Concurrently, concentrations of catechin and methylhexidine, secondary metabolites, major compounds that determine tea functional quality, were up to 50% lower during the monsoon, while total phenolic concentrations and antioxidants activity increased. The inverse relationship between tea growth and concentrations of individual secondary metabolites suggests a dilution effect, a precipitation on tea quality. So that makes sense. And so that's why actually a really good tea master, tea farmer, will not go harvest their tea the day after a heavy rain. They'll wait a few days for the equilibrium to adjust in the tea plant because they're diluted. Like when the tea plant is like flush with water, with heavy rain, all of your compounds, which not only affect like the health properties. So this article is identifying catechin and metabolites, which are more associated with like the health benefits of tea. But we're also talking about the flavor compounds, the aromatic compounds. All of those things get diluted when you have a heavy rain. So a good tea master will wait a few days after rain. But when it's like monsoon season, like right now, and you have these heavy rains just keep coming through, you don't really have that chance to wait it out. So that's why there could be effect on the quality of the tea during this time. The decrease in concentrations of tea secondary metabolites was accompanied by reduced farmer preference on the basis of sensory characteristics, as well as a decline up to 50% in household income from tea sales. So there's an economic response. Farmer surveys indicate a high degree of agreement regarding climate patterns and the effects of precipitation on tea yields and quality. Extrapolating findings from this seasonal study to long-term climate scenario projections suggests that farmers and consumers face variable implications with forecasted precipitation scenarios, and suggests that farmers and consumers and calls for research on management practices to facilitate climate adaptation for sustainable crop production. So I'm not too sure this paper really addresses what those solutions are, maybe at the end. So I'm just going to pass through, I mean, just like with any other peer-reviewed paper that is acknowledging their use of the scientific method, there are, when you look at a peer-reviewed paper, like the majority of the text that is there, like if you're a researcher, it is very important text because you want to be able to see what was the method, what were the materials, what were they looking for, what were they measuring. But for like a consumer or someone like us that's just trying to like understand what came out of the study, you can read that stuff, but it's kind of difficult to read when you're not a researcher. So here's the results: tea growth and functional quality. Tea leaves harvested during the spring drought appeared drier compared to the leaves sampled during the monsoon onset, and monsoon tea leaves that appeared tender. That makes sense, because it's more flush with liquid. Tea length and tea weight decreased significantly with increase in precipitation over the sampling periods from the spring drought to the monsoon onset, and monsoon onset to monsoon tea harvests. So they will also weigh more. That's just more water in the tea plant. The concentration of 6 major tea polyphenolic metabolites, so they were looking at EGC, EGCG, ECG, GCG, C, and GA, that determined tea functional quality decreased with the onset of the East Asian monsoon from the spring drought to the monsoon tea harvest. The compounds with the largest change in concentration during the transition from the spring drought to the monsoon tea harvest were EGC, EGCG, and ECG. EGC, EGC, ECG. Don't even have me read the entire word. I've never been able to. But yeah, EGCG must maybe like one that sounds familiar to you. That is a very popular polyphenol that is said to, address its power as an antioxidant to decrease the likelihood of cancer, future into life. These metabolites were also found to have the highest concentrations during all three seasonal tea harvest periods. In addition to changes in these polyphenolic metabolites, total methylxanthine, I said it right that time, concentrations significantly decreased from the spring drought to the monsoon onset as well as to the monsoon tea harvest. Concurrently, total phenolic concentration and antioxidant activity of tea leaves increased from the spring drought to monsoon onset and monsoon tea harvest. That's interesting. No difference was found between the monsoon onset and monsoon for total phenolic concentration, but a significant difference was found for antioxidant activity. Overall, seasonal tea harvest period and samples categorized as high quality by informants were both found to be significant for secondary metabolites analyzed: total methylxanthine concentration, total phenolic concentration, and antioxidant activity independent of plot effects. So that was kind of interesting. Sometimes science is like that, like you go in with a certain assumption, like it's going to work this way, and then after you do the actual research and you like crunch the numbers, things don't always work the way. So that was, I'm going to read that sentence again, because that concurrently total phenolic concentration and antioxidant activity of tea leaves increased from the spring drought to monsoon onset and monsoon tea harvests. I thought things were supposed to be more concentrated in the drier season. The increase in leaf weight was correlated with the decrease in the concentrations of individual phenolic compounds. Total phenolic concentration did not significantly change with leaf weight. We found a high degree of agreement between farmer responses and structured survey questions on observed climate patterns and the effects of precipitation variability on tea quality. Coded interviewed responses found that informants perceive that precipitation patterns have changed during their lifetimes, including observations of increased duration, strength, and unpredictability of rains. So that's more addressing climate change. And so this was like through interviews of the farmers, and this was done in a particular area in China. I'll go back to the top and find out. I think that she did most of her work in Yunnan, though, so I'm thinking that this is in Yunnan, but it could be different. I'll go to the top in the methods and find out where they did this. Additionally, informants perceive that temperatures have increased during their lifetimes, resulting in fewer cold days, warmer winters, warmer summers, and less frequent occurrences of frost. Informants noticed that these changes in climate patterns have impacted their tea agroecosystems with earlier spring tea harvests and monsoon tea harvests. And that's something that I have seen, that like the harvest keep getting sooner and sooner, and that's from like an early onset of the warm spring, which causes the flushing to begin. Field observations with farmers in December of 2012 found the unusual occurrence of fourth tea harvest with warmer temperatures. Tea plants are usually dormant during this period due to colder temperatures. So this would be like, so you have spring, monsoon, autumn, and now they're saying like there's this fourth flush. That would be probably like sometime in like October, November, and that's typically when the tea plants are already starting to like flower, seed, and prepare for dormancy in the winter. And so the climate change is actually affecting these seasons. The majority of informants perceive that precipitation variability impacts tea quality and yields, although fewer than half agree that temperature variability impacts tea quality and yields. All informants agree that quality varies during the 3 seasonal tea harvest and is inversely related to leaf size. Tea harvested during the dry spring harvest is rated with the highest quality and best sensory preference. Farmers perceive this high quality deteriorates with the arrival of the East Asian monsoon, when quality and sensory preferences is ranked the lowest. Specifically, informants reported that tea harvested during the dry spring harvest has stronger aroma, physiological characteristics, and taste that many describe as more bitter and bittersweet, with the sweet lingering aftertaste at the back of the throat referred to as guan. In addition to quality, farmers noted that precipitation levels are directly related to tea growth. Specifically, informants reported that when tea quality is highest during the spring harvest, there is less leaf budding, and tea leaves are drier and smaller compared to the monsoon tea harvest season. In addition to direct effects of precipitation variability on tea quality and yields, almost 70% of informants reported that changes in climate patterns have impacted tea quality and yields by altering the qualities or the quantities and types of pests and weeds in and around tea agroecosystems. So that's interesting too, that like these climate change issues aren't just directly connected with quality and harvest and yields, but also affects like their agriculture practices in regards to pests and weed management. So I'll read that sentence again because I want to understand that more. In addition to direct effects of precipitation variability on tea quality and yields, almost 70% of informants reported that changes in climate patterns have impacted tea quality and yields by altering the quantities and types of pests and weeds in and around tea agroecosystems. So these things don't operate in a vacuum. Like everything is connected. Informants reported that tea traders that buy and sell tea from the study site have the greatest demand for tea harvested during the spring and recognize monsoons as deleterious to tea quality and prices, while regarding droughts as positive for tea quality but harmful to yields. Right? So there's that counter there. And that's the same for like all quality tea. And why so many of the tea growers in more of the commodity-minded spaces like Assam and Sri Lanka and Kenya, it's really hard for them to turn to quality production because their entire infrastructures and systems and business models were all fit for the more commodity minded, which is all about high yields. Who cares about quality? Everything is just going to get masticated and chopped up and blended and homogenized anyway, so we don't need to care about the quality, but we do need to care about the yields. And so, they're taking shortcuts, they're over harvesting the leaf, so that's another issue. Like they will jump on that fourth harvest to make sure they can get as much quantity in order to support the business, but then the quality is jeopardized. But, if you want to make the highest quality product that has the highest value, you have to do slow and easy and let it grow small. That's why they say, if I'm growing tomatoes right now at my house, and I just harvested. I just harvested my first 2 fruits for the season. It feels good. I'm excited to taste them and try them out because I know they're going to be really dank. And they're like small. I don't have, this is a friggin' desert. I can water them all day, but it just dries up right away. And so these tomatoes actually ended up growing quite small for their variety, but very dense and very concentrated. I put a lot of love into, watching and taking care of these tomatoes as they grew. And so like slow and steady and smaller quantities is always going to yield higher quality. So you got the two there, and rain plays a part. Like some farmers would want to go out and harvest after a rain because they know all the leaves are going to be like big and more weight. And a lot of these like bought leaf factories, the small growers take the green leaf to the bought leaf factory to sell it to them. They're selling based off of weight. They're not selling based off of quality. They're not selling based off of, oh yeah, this was harvested at the rain, it's not going to be that good quality. There may be some difference there, but ultimately, like, what makes them the money is in the bulk, is in the quantities. For the past decade, the perceived drop in tea quality and increased tea growth that occurred with the onset of the East Asian monsoon has been accompanied with a decrease of 30 to 50% in livelihoods derived from tea sales. So this is the consequential economic impact. Specifically, for the 2002 to 2012 period, farmers experienced an average decrease of 51% in on-farm tea prices during the monsoon tea harvest compared to the spring drought tea harvest. Informants attributed the highest historical tea price that occurred during the dry spring season of 2012 to an especially high quality crop resulting from the severe droughts and not to decreased yields. Only a few farmers attributed the high spring tea prices to the 25 to 33% decline in yields resulting from the drought. So this is just saying that there's 2 reasons that could have caused that price to go up. I talked about this earlier. It could be more scarcity, so that's like decreased yield. So if there's less tea going into the market, the demand is still the same, if not bigger. So the price will go up. It's a supply and demand type of a thing. But most of the farmers interviewed here said that wasn't actually the reason why the prices went up. The prices went up because the quality of the product was actually higher. Interesting. Regardless of precipitation effects on tea, farmers express that climate factors have not negatively impacted their tea sales to date, but have negatively impacted food supply and income from other crops. However, farmers reported concern regarding the drought threshold that is beneficial for tea quality before tea plants lose viability. All farmers noted having knowledge of management practices to reduce vulnerability to tea crops of climate variability. Management practices employed by farmers to the study site to mitigate climate risk in their agroecosystems, including cultivating tea from seed rather than clonal, and growing tea plants as trees rather than as shrubs. Lastly, farmers noted that the importance of maintaining canopy coverage in forested buffer zones around agroecosystems in order to reduce risk in their tea production systems. So there we go. I'm going to put this all here. I think this is a very important part of this study. And this is like, in the title, it talks about that indigenous knowledge that could be employed to safeguard against these these risks. So yeah, there's still much more. I'm going to go back and read this article again. I put the link in the comments throughout Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. So yeah, please check that out if you want to read this article. I am quickly going to find out where the study was done. And Yunnan. Yeah. But it seems that they're working with a more like commercial system than with like artisanal, craft farmers like what we work with in Yunnan. Which is fine, like the situation is the same. So yeah, that's it. You guys have any questions? Today's all been about rain. From the desert with no rain, just lots of heavy sunshine here. But this has been interesting. I've been, grateful to educate myself today. I am going to be signing out of Instagram. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. My phone's about to die. Actually, you know what I can do? I can charge it. I got my charger here. That'll be easy. Hey, Suki. Good to see you. When are you coming back to Vegas, huh? My cord's over here. Good. Well, you can go back and watch the replay, Suki. And, or you can go find that article yourself and read it. Very interesting stuff, I think. Oh, my phone's too hot. Hey, Gabby, good to see you. All right, guys, I'm going to be signing out. My phone's too hot. I can't even charge it right now, so I've got to stop streaming. I guess this rainfall is not keeping the phone cooled down enough. But I love you all, and thank you so much for tuning in and learning something new with me. Oh, shit. Oh, excuse my language. I just said something bad. My phone died. All right, I only have 4 people watching right now, so that's fine. You guys get to hear that I curse. And not just when I'm passionate about something. I'm sure you've heard me curse, like when I'm talking about, the things that I'm so passionate about. But, yeah, I love you guys. And drink more tea, please. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow I am going to be doing a Constitution study group. So reading more Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. Until then, I'll see you guys around.